boom, we are live. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to the Nolan Hawkeye Anthony YouTube channel. And I thank all of you for being here, wherever you may be, and of course, however you may be listening. We are hitting the home stretch. It's unbelievable. I know I've said this maybe a few times, but the fact that the football season is literally right around the corner. I actually, even though I have some of these videos planned out in advance, I didn't realize how close it was. I mean, literally, Iowa's first game is in 2 weeks. The season comes upon us quicker and quicker every single year. As I get older, that's kind of what I've noticed, and I'm sure a lot of you guys have noticed that as well. And then, of course, me being a sports official, I very much kind of stay busy and go with the seasons because all sports have seasons. And so I'm able to detach and not think about it as much. And so the season comes upon me much quicker than maybe in the past. But of course, once football training starts, I know it's time for football season. So I hope you guys are excited. I'm excited. This is the first year in a long time. Probably the first year, I'd say, going back to Brian Ferentz. And even with Brian Ferentz, I don't think there was this excitement or the same type of excitement. I think maybe there was some excitement for Brian, as Iowa fans always kind of just hope that the offense will be improved. Brian was a young coach. He played on the offensive line, so on and so on. And I think a lot of people thought, well, it can't get worse. But unfortunately, that was the one time that they were wrong, saying that, including myself, saying that statement. It absolutely could get worse, and it did get worse. So this is the first time, I think, in a long time, and I think this is reflected in the ticket sales, that Iowa fans are excited to see a change, or whether there will be a change, whether things are going to be different offensively. Now, with that being said, I have already done all the positional previews for the offensive side of the football. We are now on the defensive side of the football. This is, of course, my series on Iowa positional previews, where I look at some of the incoming freshmen, the depth, and the starters for each position group. I really like this series because it kind of allows, in one fell swoop, for me to highlight recruits, guys that I am excited about coming up through the ranks and their development, guys that are already there, and guys that are maybe being overlooked a little bit. So we are going to be discussing the secondary today, which includes cornerbacks, safeties, and I think I am going to include the cash. I know, I mean, to be honest, I could just as easily put the cash position in the linebacker group, and maybe that would make more sense as far as numbers go, because, previewing the linebacking group, there's really only 2 spots. Whereas if I do the secondary, I'm doing 4 spots. But to me, I have always viewed the cash, especially under Phil Parker, more in line with the secondary, because 9 out of 9, Phil Parker has transformed a DB into a cash player, somebody who could possibly be a starter on the back end at the safety position, but also has the size and the physicality to play closer up in the box, but also is very much in coverage. Because as you guys should remember, the whole reason why the cash position was created was to stop teams like Purdue under Jeff Brom. The classic 3 linebacker set was getting exposed from offenses that spread teams out offensively, spread teams out defensively on the opposing team. So I see it more as a safety, as 9 times out of 9, it's a safety or a DB rather. That, and I guess that's probably a better way of saying it. I view the cash position as a defensive back, a physical defensive back. And Phil Parker has transformed them from the DB, a safety or cornerback, into a cash. If we look at the history of the cash position, you have Geno Stone, who played that a little bit. Of course, he also played a lot of safety as well. You have Amani Hooker. And a few, those are the 2 guys that come to mind. Micah Hyde, I believe. No, Micah Hyde played mostly safety. I'd have to go back and look, but those are 2 of the guys that and now, of course, you have Sebastian Castro, which we will, of course, get into. Here we go. I actually found an article here, and I think I'm going to go ahead and read this. This may have been going all the way back to 2013. This is a player preview from, let's see here, Hawkwire, I think it's called. Yeah, Hawkwire. Hawks 2023 snapshot profile. So this was actually for last year. And of course, this is what it says. Sebastian Castro is slotted to start at the cash position, which of course he did, and he did very well, which I'm going to circle back to. And this time, unlike other videos, I think I'm going to start right off the bat talking about the starters rather than the recruits, which I will talk about the incoming recruits and some of the guys in the depth that make up the depth, some of the second and third stringers. But I'm going to do that last. In the previous videos, I've kind of gone back and forth in how I do it. The cash position is an innovation Phil Parker created for the Iowa defense that is part linebacker, part DB. Iowa has seen many greats serve time in this role, such as Amani Hooker and Dane Belton. If you consider Castro a defensive back at the cash, he joins a group of starters that features corners Cooper DeJean, aka Cooper DeJean, and Jermari Harris, and safeties Quinn Schulte and Xavier Wampa. So, and then of course, one of the players that should be highlighted, if I count Sebastian Castro, well, actually no, because in Iowa's, I was going to say if I count Sebastian Castro, I should also count Kyler Fisher. But the difference is because when Iowa does their depth chart, they have both listed. But I think the reason why they do that is because one is listed as the pure cash and the other one is listed as that outside linebacker, not as the cash. If they were to go to a 3 linebacker set or formation, it would be Kyler Fisher. So those are some guys: Dane Belton, Amani Hooker. I think Geno Stone played it a little bit, but he also played a lot of safety as well. And this has been a pivotal position for the Iowa Hawkeyes. Absolutely crucial. And I actually thought, and I'm going to be talking about him obviously more as we continue, I actually thought that Xavier Wampa was going to be a perfect fit at the cash position. Now, in all honesty, somebody like Xavier Wampa, who is a physical freak from the moment he stepped onto Iowa's campus, years beyond his age, can play any position, really. But when I did his recruiting video, I really did see him as somebody who could quite possibly be the perfect cash. And at the time, I also floated the idea of Cooper DeJean and Xavier Wampa starting at the two safety spots, because if you remember, Cooper DeJean, who obviously is in the NFL now with the Philadelphia Eagles, a lot of people actually considered him a safety. I think that mostly has to do with him being a white guy, and they undersold how dang athletic he was, but nonetheless. So I'm going to read this from The Athletic. Few, if any, defenses have played as productively as Iowa over the last 4 years, and perhaps none leveraged their style of play quite as effectively. Only Clemson and Georgia have allowed fewer yards per play than Iowa's 4.6 over that span. The Hawkeyes have 68 interceptions over that 4-year block, 4 more than Appalachian to lead the nation, and 9 more than Oregon among Power 5 programs. Now, Iowa did have a down year last year with interceptions. Iowa's 35 win, and it just goes to show that Iowa's defense can be successful in a variety of ways. We've seen years where they have their sack total up, which I highlighted in the defensive line preview, which is, by the way, the one position group as of this recording that I have finished. I recorded it last week. You guys can check it out. We've seen years where they were amazing at takeaways. I mean, top 5 in the entire country. You know, the years with Josh Jackson, Desmond King leading the nation in INTs. So it just shows that Phil Parker is a genius, really, and his defenses can win and be successful multiple ways. Iowa's 35 wins are tied for the 8th most in Power 5 and one of only 7 programs to finish every year ranked in the AP's final top 25. Let's see when this was. Oh, wow. This was done in 2022. So it's kind of hard to parse through. Actually, to be honest, guys, I tried to go back and look at all the depth charts. My memory's good, but it's not so good as to remember exactly where everybody played every single year. But I don't think Geno Stone did play the cash position. I think the cash position was, as I looked back, I was reminded it started when Amani Hooker was there. He was the creator of that position, essentially. And it was so new that he was still listed in his final year at Iowa as a strong safety, as the starting strong safety in many of the depth charts. They didn't even have the cash position listed on many of the depth charts. And then the following year, when Amani Hooker graduated, Nick Niemann was actually listed. So I think Nick Niemann actually was the only mostly linebacker who was able to play the cash position as a linebacker, like a more linebacker specific individual, or a linebacker first individual rather than a cornerback or DB first individual. And then, of course, Dane Belton came, and then now we are on Sebastian Castro. So I think that is the sequence of events with all of that. And I think in that in-between year, they had, now Nick Niemann was good enough to stay on the field most of the time. And if I remember correctly, that was the storyline, was who would fill Amani Hooker's role, since it was a fairly new position, and Amani Hookers don't grow on trees, especially if you haven't necessarily recruited for that position. And then, you know, the question was whether Nick Niemann was going to be able to, as a more linebacker specific player, be able to play that position. But of course, and the answer was yes, he did a fantastic job. But of course, Dane Belton was early in his development, and I'm sure, if I remember correctly, he was able to get in there. So nonetheless, That is how I view the cash position. I think in the future, how I'm going to do it is basically if they are a linebacker who was converted to the cash position, or somebody who was a linebacker when they first stepped on Iowa's campus, and then they converted to the cash position, then I'll consider them a part of the linebackers, which is a rarity. I think it's more often the latter, which is they came in as a DB and they converted to a cash. So Sebastian Castro, just to move this along, has garnered a ton of preseason buzz. And it's only gotten more as the offseason has continued. There was a recent top 100 college players in all of college football list that was put out, and Sebastian Castro was actually ahead of Jay Higgins, which I think wouldn't necessarily be like a total surprise to Iowa fans, but I think to the casual Iowa fan, Jay Higgins is slightly ahead of Sebastian Castro, but they're both really good players. But I could be wrong about that, but that's kind of how I see it. But I think a lot of people are kind of seeing Sebastian Castro as like that sexy kind of like under the radar hidden gem that nobody is aware of, and is putting them on their list as somebody that's like, yep, that's the guy. And who has a better story than Sebastian Castro? I mean, the guy came to Iowa. He's done it the right way. He was actually a fairly decently recruited prospect at a high school, a high 3-star out of Oakland High School. And he's waited patiently behind really talented players. And now, well, actually last year, he had his spot. He had his turn. I can't remember if he actually started the year before that. He may have actually already started, so it would be 2022. But nonetheless, the way that he did it is exactly what the Iowa coaching staff is looking for when they recruit players. They might have some nice offers and all of that, but they still, nonetheless, they come to Iowa, they are coached up, developed up, and then they're ready to go. And of course, he probably could have left to the NFL last year, depending on how his combine numbers went, would be the primary determiner in where he was drafted. I could see him going anywhere from as high as the 3rd round, maybe, probably more like the 4th or 5th round would probably be where he was drafted last year, had he decided to go into the NFL. And I think it was a smart decision for him to come back, because now he's going to be able to really show that last year was not an accident, that he's a dang good football player, and he is yet another in a long line of successful Iowa DBs under Phil Parker. So here, according to 247 Sports, they have Castro as the number 9 defensive player in the entire country. So he's definitely seen his stock rise a ton, and he is a guy that could absolutely improve his draft stock. The only thing working against him is he's a little bit older. He might even be a 6-year senior at this point. But a good football player is a good football player, and I could see him going as high as the 2nd round and improving his draft stock that much, and being like a solid 2nd round draft pick. Of course, Iowa DBs have had varying levels of success. I think it really depends on the scheme that the NFL defense runs. Corners have had less success in the NFL. Phil Parker corners, you think of Josh Jackson, Riley Moss. Riley Moss is still getting his feet wet. You have Michael Ejimudie, who seemed to be doing good, but has seen his career kind of take a back step a little bit. We have Desmond King. Desmond King's had a nice little career, for sure. He's had a nice career. So, it kind of ebbs and flows. I think the big swing and miss would definitely be Josh Jackson. He was not able to make it work in the NFL for whatever reason. But Iowa safeties, on the other hand, have done a great job. Whether they were cash or pure safeties like Geno Stone, you have Dane Belton, you have Amani Hooker, you have multiple guys that played safety or cash at Iowa, Kayvon Merriweather, that are on NFL rosters. So here's some of his stats from last year. He had 67 tackles, um, up from his 28 in 2022. And it just shows that this guy definitely just keeps getting better and better and better. Guys that are able to take yearly steps is definitely a positive sign. So this is going to be the top dog on Iowa's, possibly their entire defense, as he's the guy that's really going to be out there making plays all over the field, interceptions, forced fumbles, sacks, tackles. If there's one critique that I could give him, I think having 3 interceptions is a solid number. On the high end, I would say 5 or 6 would be really, really solid. Like that's like elite. 3 is good. Forced fumbles, if he could get that up to 2 or 3, that'd be good. And then maybe add, I don't know, 3 to 5 sacks, and then get his tackle total up to 80. But the thing is if Sebastian Castro is having a lot of tackles, that might not be a good thing, because that means that he's getting picked on a lot and being forced to make tackles due to the play coming his way. So those are his numbers. Moving this on, just to wrap it up on Sebastian Castro, again, the most important player on Iowa's secondary, really talented player, future NFL draft pick. Hopefully he can stay healthy. Really love his story. Moving this on, I'm going to look at Iowa's depth chart. We're going to talk about their corners. So the corner position is kind of interesting for Iowa, as it's since Riley Moss left, we haven't really had like a guy, like the guy, a Desmond King, a Josh Jackson, a Riley Moss, a Michael Ojimudie. We haven't had the guy. And there's been guys that are talented, have, some solid physical traits, and were solid recruits. In Xavier Wampa's class, that was quite possibly Iowa's best DB class in years. So as you guys can see here, the main contenders opposite Jamari Harris, who, if you wanted to make a case of who the guy is, it would be Jamari Harris. He's probably the most cemented starter at the cornerback position. But coming into this year, that second cornerback position opposite Jamari was really up in question. You had Deshaun Lee, who out of Belleville in Michigan produced a lot of talent. Kind of was the surprise emerger of that really, really solid class that Xavier Wampa was in. And he did pretty good. He's a redshirt sophomore, so he's still got plenty of time to make a name for himself. But then, of course, we were hearing, and then, of course, actually, before I get there, then there's TJ Hall out of California. San Joaquin Memorial, the San Jose area. And he got some run as a true freshman, and the coaches loved him, highly talented, ton of upside, coach's son. He decommitted from Washington to go to Iowa. It was a huge get for Iowa. But then last year, he was injured. I'm not sure if he was able to take a redshirt year that year, because sometimes our lads is not completely accurate on the classification of each player. Just so you're aware. But it is correct as far as the players. Okay. And I was really hopeful that this would be the year. He's not injured. He'd be able to finally emerge and become the guy that he is capable of being. He's got excellent size, 6'1" at the cornerback position, which is typically what Phil Parker likes. But then, lo and behold, last year we were hearing a lot about this white kid out of the Chicago area. We were hearing rumblings of a Cooper DeJean 2.0, John Nestor. And you would have thought that this kid was a 5-star cornerback coming out of high school, how quickly he was able to come to Iowa and receive attention and praise. And so as of now, guys, it looks like John Nestor is going to win the opposite cornerback spot. And if that is the case, we might see TJ Hall transfer. Now, theoretically, he could wait and battle for the right cornerback position when Jamari Harris goes on to the NFL, if he just is able to do that, which I think he should be able to, at the very least as a free agent pickup. But I actually think he'll probably get drafted, especially if he's able to stay healthy and have a good year. But this is what we got. And so, it is what it is, guys. Ultimately, I want the most talented guy to be the starter. And if that's John Nestor, I trust Phil Parker that is who it is. So we'll see how it shakes out. Even if John Nestor is the day one starter, both TJ Hall and Deshaun Lee will definitely be used and utilized in certain packages. And just because this is what it says here doesn't mean that that's how it will consistently be throughout the season, that things are not subject to change, because they are. Guys get injured, unfortunately, and sometimes guys are not ready for the limelight. Wow, it looks like it was right. DJ Hall is a junior, so maybe he didn't redshirt last year. But I do know he did have injuries, of course. So when was this updated? July 24th. So we're about to have another update here in the next week or so. But that is the cornerback position, the starters. I'm going to get to some of the guys that are in the wings. A lot of people thought that would be John Nestor, but of course, this guy has surged up the depth chart. And, really what it boils down to, honestly, guys, is Phil Parker requires his guys, his defensive players, to be smart and to have high football IQs. And if you have a high football IQ, you'll have a spot in Phil Parker's defense, because his defense is really scheme oriented and everybody has their role. All right, guys, moving this on to the safety and the free safety. Of course, there's Xavier Wampa. He's in his junior season. I cannot believe he's already a junior. I'm going to talk about this in a separate video when I highlight how Iowa's official visit month turned out with regards to Yossi Epinesa deciding to commit to Iowa. But if you really think about it, and of course he hasn't signed yet, so there's still a lot of time between now and then, and anything's possible. But if you really think about it, Kirk Ferentz, since 2015, has landed 3 5-star players, not consensus, but 5-star players for at least one of the recruiting services, and almost 4. You have AJ Epinesa, you have Xavier Wanpa, you almost had Caden Proctor, who was committed for until the last possible moment. And then now you have Yossi Epinesa. And as much as we sometimes begrudge the Kirk Ferentz process, his process has also allowed, and his connections and relationships have allowed Iowa to land some pretty high caliber guys. So anyways, we have Xavier Wanpa, and this is probably the guy that I'm looking at the most. This is his year. This is, the developmental years are, you're always developing and refining the tools in your tool bag, but this is the main year for him to take that massive leap forward. Is he going to be an NFL caliber player after this season? Are we going to see the type of season out of him this year that will put him in contention to be in the NFL draft conversation? I'd be surprised if we don't. Okay. This is going to be the guy. Him and Jamari Harris are going to be the 2 guys that really determine how good this DB group can be. And this is a really talented DB group, guys. Really, really talented. Okay. You have Cohen Entringer. Unfortunately, he's kind of got a log jam, and he'll get his opportunity next year when Quinn Schulte graduates. But I'm looking forward to seeing him. He's got great size, was a former soccer player, and was a great get in the same class as Xavier Wanpa out of Walled Lake, Michigan. He was a late get. I did a recruiting video on that. And then, of course, there is Zach Lutmer, who is already in the 2 deeps, redshirt freshman. And I'm not surprised by this at all. I have been doing this for a long time now. And not just that, but just also my former background as a collegiate athlete. I know some of the things to look for to see, much like Kirk Ferentz, when guys are going to be successful. And the guys that are successful, that have the highest percentage chance of being successful, are guys that play multiple sports, that do well in school. And, you see a guy like Zach Lutmer, who also played quarterback in high school and showed that he was a multifaceted, talented athlete. You can see it from a mile away that he'll be successful when he gets to college. Now, he was not ranked that high, and I think that was mostly due to going to such a small school. But I'm not surprised by this in the least. So good for him. All right, guys, to wrap this up, let's take a look at some of the recruits that are in the depth that is at Iowa. All right, guys, so here are some of the incoming DBs. We have Rashad Godfrey. I'm actually very high on him. I know on 3 it has him listed as a safety, but I don't think he's coming to Iowa as a safety. I think he's coming to Iowa as a cornerback. But it doesn't mean things can't change. Things are very fluid, of course, and ultimately Iowa wants to play guys at their best position. But he is coming to Iowa, at least initially, as a cornerback. And even here, it has him listed as a cornerback. He's got great size. Came from one of the biggest classifications in the state of Florida. He's played against excellent competition at Armwood. If you don't know, Florida football does things a little bit different. They recently changed it, and it's kind of fluid this way. where they have city schools and non-city schools, and they have divisions based off of that. If you're a city school or an urban school or a non-urban school, it's unique to say the least. I have never seen something like that, but nonetheless. And the other guy is Jalen Watson. I think of the two, he is probably the more developmental prospect, as he's mostly played wide receiver. But Iowa really, unfortunately, swung and missed on a few of their initial cornerback options. So they had to get a little bit more creative with it, which is fine. That's totally fine. And they landed Jalen Watson, who is the nephew of a former Iowa Hawkeye great running back. I'm blanking on which one that is at the moment, but nonetheless, he does have that history. And I do think, and he has a grade of an 88 by 247 Sports, which is pretty good. I do think that he has a high ceiling. And in the long run, his familiarity with the wide receiver position, I do believe, will help him a lot. It'll help him a lot once he's able to build his knowledge at the DB position. We'll go back one more recruiting class. Khalil Tate. I was very high on him. As you guys can see here, strongly graded, high 3-star, 87, 89, 77, 5.7. So, I mean, by 247 Sports and Rivals, he was a borderline 4-star prospect. We haven't heard a lot about him. And that is surprising to me. We can see here, still on the roster, 5'11", 197. So maybe it's just taking a little bit more time for him. When he was recruited to Iowa, I think they saw him as a cash and possibly as a safety at 5'11", 197 pounds, which I think is accurate. If you're going to be playing the cash position, I think you should be in that 200 to 210 range. John Nestor is 196. They could be playing him at cornerback. I mean, there's been plenty of times where Iowa has taken a high school safety because Phil Parker likes taller DBs or corners, rather. Deshaun Lee is 187, 187 pounds. Tegan Davis, 187 pounds. Cohen Entringer, 207 pounds. By the way, guys, Cohen Entringer, I do see as a possibility to take over for Sebastian Castro at the cash position. He is definitely somebody that I have in mind as somebody who might be able to take over that position. Okay, he's got the size, he's got the athleticism. Does he have the physicality? You guys can see here, and it looks like Khalil Tate on his list that he won an award for team leadership for the annual team awards. As you guys can see here, Xavier Wanpa, 215 pounds at 6'2". So I'm trying to find Sebastian Castro because I think he is the more accurate person to base him on because they both have similar physiques, as Sebastian Castro is 5'11", 6 foot, which is the same as Khalil Tate, 205 pounds. And that's what I think. I think if you're going to play cash as a converted DB, I think anywhere from 200 to 210 is appropriate. And then, of course, there was John Nestor, which was nicely graded, 88, 89 by On3. On3 was really high on him. 77, 5.6 rivals. I already talked about him. Let's look at his offer sheets real quick. And even him, look, I mean, they considered him a safety coming out of high school. And that's what I'm saying is, at the end of the day, Phil Parker is looking for athletes at the DB position. So, I mean, he had some really nice offers, guys. Purdue, Iowa. I mean, really, he had nice offers. Power 4 offers: Purdue, Iowa State, Minnesota, Kansas. Not bad. Okay. Don't know if he ended up being offered by Illinois or not. I don't think he was, because he actually committed to Iowa very early on in the process. He went to Marist, which is a great high school in the state of Illinois. Just waiting for this to go back here. So we'll see what happens with Khalil Tate. He might still be a year away from getting in the depth chart, and he just needs some room for that to clear out. But I'm looking to hear his name on special teams this year. And I definitely see him, if he doesn't decide to transfer, which I haven't heard anything about that. This is still only his redshirt freshman season. I expect him to break through next year. And I could see him vying for the cash position or the safety position down the line. But of course, again, he's going to have to wait for that to clear out. I mean, the most immediate path for him to get on the field would be the cash position, because Sebastian Castro is going to graduate, unless Phil Parker is playing him at corner, which I don't think he is. I mean, I could be wrong. I mean, shoot, the NCAA football game considers him a corner. So they might be gearing him up for the corner. I would not be surprised, guys. I personally see him buying more for the cash spot, but I could definitely, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if he's a corner as well. I mean, literally in his commitment, they consider him a cornerback. Iowa football picked up a commitment on Tuesday from 3-star cornerback. And on here, it says he's 6'3", which of course he's not. He's 5'11", but he had some nice offers: Boston College, Arkansas, Purdue, Minnesota, Mississippi State, Missouri, Nebraska, Oregon, Penn State. He was probably one of the best recruited or best offered guy in that, or like top 3 in that class. So, and so let's see what this says on him. I just haven't heard about him in a long time, guys. So I want to see if there's any news. But sometimes guys get to Iowa, and it's kind of this way on purpose. We don't hear about them for about 2 years because they're in development mode. And then we had a former Iowa running back commit transfer over to the DB position. We were seeing him on the depth chart, but of course he's been buried again on it, and that's kind of how it goes. So trying to see if there's anybody else. Aiden Hall, of course, is no longer with the Iowa Hawkeyes. Not really sure what happened there. There's Zach Lutmer there, as you guys can see. I mean, he was a pretty mid 3-star prospect. There's Tegan Davis. Iowa took a flyer on him very, very late in the process. Super, super under the radar snag for the Iowa Hawkeyes. Mid 3-star, 86, 76, 5.5. Not bad. Which is interesting how he's lower. I don't know how the consensus ratings work for this, because, Zach Lutmer is 85, 86, 74, 5.6, and somehow he's higher than Tegan Davis, who seems to me to have a better overall rating. So I don't think On3 always updates. I think they've gotten better, but They haven't always updated their consensus rating completely. And then, of course, this was the major year. Xavier Wampa, as I told you guys, he was not a consensus 5-star. ESPN had him well outside the top 100. He was 155. And then On3 had him at 127. Okay. So, still a huge get and still it's still highly rated, but it's very hard to get a consensus 5-star. There's Cohen Entringer right there. Really nice grades, 88, 88, 76, 5.7. Of course, Carson May's gone. TJ Hall, 92 grade by On3. 88, 77, 5.7. And then there's Deshaun Lee, 84, 87, 77, 5.7. So this was a really nice class. And Iowa actually had another guy that was committed, and Orlando Trader, who ultimately decided to not go to Iowa. So anyways, guys, that is my defensive back preview for the Iowa Hawkeyes. This room has plenty of talent. I would rate this group as not one of the best, but a group vying for one of the best. I mean, it's really talented. They have some proven commodities. I mean, they're up there. Okay. They're definitely up there. I don't think they're in the top 2, but they're up there. They're vying for it. They got talent that's trying to emerge. They have depth. They have experience, not the most experience, but a good amount. And, I am, as I said throughout this video, I'm really paying attention to guys like Xavier Wampa. Can he finally break through? Quinn Schulte, is he going to be the most talented walk-on safety that we've ever seen? Because a lot of the walk-on safeties that have become the status quo for Phil Parker are okay collegiately, but not good enough to play after. Because the safety position, again, much like the entire Iowa defense, requires a high football IQ. And then, of course, Sebastian Castro, this guy, super talented. I cannot wait to see what he's able to do this year. And it should be excellent. And we are just days away, 2 weeks away from the start of the season. I can't wait for it. We're literally going to have the first game preview in a week. I'm probably going to have to put, I've been doing these videos 1 week, 1 week after the next, but I'm probably going to have to put out the remainder, which is the linebacker group, tomorrow or something. So anyways, be on the lookout for that, guys. Be sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe. And last but not least, DBAP, don't be a pussy willow and fox your feelings, because your feelings just don't matter. I love you, Hawk fans. See you guys next time. Go Hawks. Bye-bye.